Will Osprey was one of the first wrestlers to sell me on the whole fighting spirit thing. As a kid that grew up exclusively WWE and TNA, I went through my heavily critical phase as a wrestling fan, obsessed with the wrestlers selling every little thing and being so critical to the point that when they didn't, I dismissed the entire match that I was watching over the slightest thing that looked like a no-sell. As you can imagine, when I started branching out as a wrestling fan and watching more independent promotions back in 2016, I was in for a rude awakening. Just about all professional wrestling outside of WWE, especially the likes of Ring of Honor and New Japan, had wrestlers who weren't selling the moves like I'd come to expect from wrestling as a whole. That, and I just expected all wrestling to be just what I thought it should be, as if I had any pull or experience as a booker of these promotions. Over the years, I'd like to think that I've learned to let these promotions do whatever the hell they wanted, and I'd watch the show for whatever it was and base my opinion around how I felt about what I was watching without coming at it from a totalitarian perspective. No more, no, they did it wrong because it should be like this and nothing else, at least not like I used to. I eventually grew to love the fighting spirit that New Japan and so many other promotions have adopted because I stopped seeing all of it as just the wrestlers being dumb and relying on cheap tricks to get the match over. To put it simply, the idea of wrestling that I had built up in my head throughout the years, that perfect wrestling performance, was just as real as the girl that wants you to be a cross between Superman and Batman, or the guy that wants the woman that's everything he ever wanted and then some. In other words, it wasn't real at all. I was denying the reality of pro wrestling as it was, or I guess you could say I wasn't adjusting to it all that well. It's kind of like when WWE went from the DDT being one of the most devastating moves in pro wrestling to it just being another spot in the match. I remember when I started seeing wrestlers use the super kick more frequently in their matches and hating it with every fiber of my being because how dare they disrespect Shawn's legacy, Shawn's legendary finisher in such a way when it meant so much when he did it. Now I see it for what it is, a super kick. A move that many wrestlers do, but a move that Shawn Michaels won his matches with because it was his finisher. A move that he perfected for himself. A super kick from Max Caster might not have the same effect as a sweet chin music from Shawn Michaels. It's up to me as a wrestling fan to decide whether or not I buy into the wrestler or the move or the match. And now with all that being said, that brings me to Will Ospreay. Back to Will Ospreay, that is. The first independent wrestling promotion that I was made aware of and frequently watched was WCPW, What Culture's old fed made up of a random assortment of local Brit-Res guys, former WWE names like Damien Sandow, and guys from overseas like Kushida and Minoru Suzuki, whenever they made the trip for fun or to make a few bucks. It was through that promotion and through a match between Osprey and Rey Mysterio that I finally started warming up to this new wave of pro wrestling. I had already started buying into the fighting spirit thing with the likes of Juice Robinson, of all people I know. But seeing Will wrestle at Rey Mysterio's pace, so to speak, it opened my eyes a little bit and I started to see wrestling as a whole a lot differently. Now that doesn't mean that I think every match with fighting spirit automatically makes it a classic in my book. Like I said, some guys pull it off and some don't. From my point of view nowadays, the match just is what it is, and it's what you think of it that determines whether or not if it's a good match or not. Duh. And I'm not obsessed with everything outside of WWE being just like WWE like I used to be. Lucha Underground was another promotion that fed into me warming up to wrestling outside of my old, relatively linear perspective. And to name an example of what I'm trying to get across here, Prince Puma, aka Ricochet, would have matches where he would have some crazy shit happen to him, but he would get up and walk away from it like it was nothing. A lot of the time when he did that, I didn't buy into it. I thought it looked mediocre and stupid on his part to just get up and walk when he had just spent the entire last 5 minutes of the match getting his leg caved in with a lead pipe and not even limp. I just didn't buy into it at all. Same with guys like Jonathan Gresham back in the old days of Ring of Honor when he was first having matches with Jay Lethal and the fucker would just get up from a lethal injection on the outside of the ring like it didn't do shit to him. Then on the opposite side of that, there are matches like the main event of Wrestling Dontaku 2021 with Will Ospreay and Shingo Takagi, where I can buy Will taking a Made in Japan through 2 tables and still being able to fight through it for another 20 minutes, with both men speeding up unexpectedly in the middle of the match to deliver a lariat or a hidden blade that I didn't see coming. I bought into every move. I didn't watch this and think, man, that was dumb, or tune out at any point. But at the end of the day, I guess it just depends on how the music sounds to you. I can understand the criticism of a match like Osprey versus Takagi, though. I hated Omega versus Okada, the Omega versus Okada match from Dominion 2017, just to name one example. Hell, I hated just about everything I saw from New Japan Pro Wrestling from 2015 all the way up until the end of 2017. I just didn't get it personally. I also didn't like it, and I didn't buy into it at the time. But now in 2021, I'm watching matches in the Choco Pro promotion where everything is just so damn over the top and silly that it would make the likes of Jim Cornette lose his fucking mind if he saw it. Not that it would take much to piss that guy off. A promotion that in his eyes would be a bastardized take on pro wrestling that would eventually lead to the downfall of pro wrestling itself is a great one in my book. I used to be upset at the idea of those different types of pro wrestling spreading and infecting the companies that I would watch, specifically with WWE and with how NXT was moving there a few years ago. Now NXT is handily one of my favorite brands in pro wrestling today, and I'm not concerned or upset about the business as like I once was. I don't look at WWE as wrestling as much as I do look at it today as just one flavor of wrestling, specifically the TV show kind. All of that was pretty much long form of explaining why I love matches like Osprey versus Takagi so much, and why I don't think just anyone could pull off what they did. This match is a match of the year contender for me already, and I don't see anybody but Will and Shingo topping this match, whether it's against each other or against other people. That's not to take away from everything else on Wrestling Dontaku this year, though. Jay White and Hiroshi Tanahashi had a killer match for the Never Openweight Championship on night one. Jay's just such an insane talent in this company, man. The dude's money. And even with his fucked up knees, Tanahashi's still putting on classics in 2021. Really, I just wish that these two shows, specifically the second one, wasn't weighed down by those exhibition tag team matches that the heads at New Japan are so accustomed to doing. More often than not, they're boring and not worth the time, and don't do anything for the show outside of giving the live crowd a chance to see stars like Okada wrestle a match, even outside of the big money matches like you'd come to expect from him. I will say that the tag matches on the first night were killer, though, specifically the first two. Just about everything else, though, you can miss and be just fine. Maybe wait until someone on Twitter uploads the gif of Taguchi hip attacking everyone in the match in one go. Beyond that, I say these shows were just okay overall. You got 4 matches that were excellent or better amidst some matches that were just good and the rest being below average at best. Pretty much par for the course for New Japan shows. I personally can't wait for them to return to the new G1 format this year, hopefully even without the Young Lion matches. Those tend to be the shows where New Japan are at their best, and shows like these are just paving the way to get there.